Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says more than 7,000 people were evacuated through humanitarian corridors in 4 cities on Friday. He also says more than 12,000 Russians have been killed. But Zelensky is accusing Russia of preventing people from escaping Mariupol. The city's been under heavy attack by Russian forces, and many residents have been left without power and water. Zelensky says Russia didn't let their aid in, so they will try again on Saturday. Russian forces, meanwhile, have been expanding their strikes. Ukraine's 4th largest city, Dnipro, is under attack. Aerial attacks also bombarded airfields in western Ukraine. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes, as well as former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, John Herbst. John is also a senior director for the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Ambassador, let's go ahead and start with you. Dnipro is a major industrial hub in eastern Ukraine. Tell us, what is the strategy behind Russia attacking the city?
Putin is not able to win a victory by defeating the Ukrainian military. He's had many problems. So he's trying to bomb the Ukrainians into submission. We're seeing that especially in Mariupol. We're seeing it especially in Kharkiv. But now he's beginning to a lesser extent in Kyiv. And we're now seeing him extending that to other cities which have largely been untouched, not just Dnipro, but also Lutsk in the last couple of days.
Nancy, I want to bring you into this discussion. So as we see Russian President Vladimir Putin changing his strategy, let's talk about President Biden's strategy. Friday, he announced new sanctions against Russia. How do these actually differ from the previous sanctions that we've seen, and what impact might they have?
Well, they basically keep the pressure on Russia, and the new sanctions are focused on trade. So President Biden announcing that he wants to revoke Russia's most favored nation trading status. This is a status that countries grant one another through the World Trade Organization that enables them basically to trade goods more easily and more cheaply. It gives them lower tariffs. It strips away some of the export caps and so forth. And so what the president's saying, and the reason he says he wants to do this is because he can't do it on his own. He needs Congress to approve it, but they're likely to do so. This is something that Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, has been pushing for about the last week or so, that more countries, not just the U.S., should be stripping the Russians of this most favored nation trading status. Russia is our 26th largest trading partner. They send us all kinds of goods, not just energy, but also some food supplies. And so now it looks like in the near future that is going to become more fraught for the Russians, especially because in addition to stripping Russia of this most favored nation trading status, the president also signed an executive order that bans the import of some pretty pivotal Russian goods, including seafood, diamonds, and liquor. So it's safe to say that we won't be seeing a lot of Russian vodka heading to the U.S. anytime soon.
Ambassador, I want to get both your take on what Nancy just told us and what effect you think it might have on Putin's strategy, but also I want to get you to weigh in on something that we've been hearing from military experts recently. They've said that seeing these Russian forces dispersing into different areas around Kyiv might be an indication that the Russian forces intend to really launch an attack against the capital city and try and take Kyiv. What's your assessment of the situation?
Okay, I think that we've seen strong sanctions placed on Russia with the Biden administration in the lead, and that's been excellent. The dispersal of forces, that large 40-mile convoy around Kyiv, is an indication that the Kremlin is ramping up preparations for an assault on the city, and we've seen much greater bombing of Kyiv in the last 24 hours than we have before. That's why the United States needs to do more, the Biden administration needs to do more about getting weapons to Ukraine. High-range missiles, more Stingers, more drones, and also anti-ship missiles to help protect Odessa in the south. But I don't think Russia will be, I should say, I don't think Russia will be able to take the city of Kyiv. They'll bombard it to smithereens, but the defenses there are very, very strong, and the people are determined to repulse them.
Nancy, tell us the latest in terms of what the White House's position is on providing that type of military assistance. And on Friday, President Biden also signed a spending bill that includes additional aid for Ukraine. Tell us what's in that.
Well, it includes money that would help to provide some of the kinds of military equipment that the ambassador was just talking about. It's $13.6 billion in aid for Ukraine, not just military aid, but humanitarian aid, economic aid, an indication that the U.S. understands that there are immediate needs, but there are likely to be long-term needs for Ukraine and the surrounding area as well. $4 billion of that aid goes, Lana, just for refugees, people who are leaving Ukraine with nothing more than perhaps a suitcase, if that, and so they need everything. So this is something that the White House put out there a little more than a week ago, and Congress put up very little resistance. It passed as part of a larger spending bill, and this is something that they're encouraging other countries to do as well, because there are such immediate needs in Ukraine, both for refugees and people who can't leave the country, but who have been forced out of their homes. So there's food assistance, there are supplies, and of course, most pivotally right now for the Ukrainian military, there's money in there to help provide the Ukrainian military with more of the weapons that it needs as well.
So, Ambassador, I want to have the last question go to you. In terms of what Nancy's talking about with the White House trying to send additional aid, we just heard from President Zelensky that Russian forces are impeding their ability to get humanitarian aid to people, civilians in Ukraine. I'm wondering what you think the U.S. ought to do about that situation.
Well, there's a very controversial proposal, in fact, which I'm involved in. A concept was developed by General Philip Breedlove and Ambassador Kurt Volker to have a humanitarian air corridor to make sure that humanitarian assistance could get into besieged cities like Mariupol, and also so that people are able to leave those cities, that civilians are able to leave those cities. Moscow is not letting food in, medicine into Mariupol, to Kharkiv, and not letting people out because it wants to pound the Ukrainians into submission by including killing civilians, which is a war crime. The Ukrainians are reporting that something like 1,300 or 1,400 people have died in Mariupol, civilians, over the past few days. So this notion of an air corridor, which we would protect with our planes, would provide an immediate solution to this grave humanitarian crisis. But there are many people, the Biden administration, NATO, have said no to it because they're afraid of a confrontation between U.S. or NATO and Russian military forces. I understand the caution, but the human suffering that's going on right now is simply unconscionable.
All right. Ambassador John Herbst, Nancy Cordes, thank you both.
You're welcome.
Thank you.